When people talk about America's earliest mysteries, none is more chilling than the disappearance of the Roanoke colonists. More than 100 settlers vanished without leaving anything more than a carved word on a tree. Their story starts in the late 16th century, when England sought a foothold in the New World. Roanoke Island was chosen as the site, but from the beginning, the settlers faced hardships and uneasy relations with local tribes. In 1587, John White led a new group of families to establish a permanent English colony. These settlers were not soldiers or prisoners but ordinary people hoping for a better life. Supplies were scarce even before they arrived. Still, they worked quickly to build homes and begin planting. White tried to ease tensions with tribes nearby, but miscommunication and past conflicts created distrust that proved difficult to overcome. Soon after the settlers settled in, disaster struck when a colonist was killed by a local warrior. White tried to respond carefully, but relations worsened. The colonists urged him to return to England for supplies. Though reluctant to leave his family, including his newborn granddaughter Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America, White agreed. He promised to return as quickly as he could, unaware that fate had other plans. Once White reached England, he found the nation preparing for war with Spain. Every available ship was seized to defend the coast. This meant White could not return to Roanoke for months. Each delay weighed heavily on him, as he imagined the colony struggling without food or tools. He pleaded with officials and private ship owners, but the threat of invasion made his mission seem less urgent to those in power. By the time White finally secured passage back across the Atlantic, 3 years had passed. Storms battered their route, pushing the crew far off course. Even when land appeared, thick fog and shifting sandbars made navigation treacherous. White stood at the deck's edge, anxious and weary, unsure what he would find. Every mile brought him closer to an answer he had feared for years. When White's party reached Roanoke in 1590, they saw no smoke, no movement, and no welcoming figures. Instead, the settlement was eerily silent. Houses had been dismantled rather than destroyed, suggesting the colonists left deliberately. Trees had overgrown walkways where children once played. White's heart pounded as he stepped ashore, calling out for familiar voices that never answered. Then came the discovery that shaped centuries of speculation, a single word carved into a post, CROATOAN. This was the name of a nearby island and also the name of a friendly indigenous group. Crucially, there was no carved cross. The signal settlers were supposed to leave if they fled under threat. To White, the message suggested relocation, not disaster. But other clues painted a murkier picture. White urged the crew to sail immediately to CROATOAN Island, confident that his family was waiting. Yet fierce weather struck overnight, ripping sails and nearly sinking their vessel. The crew refused further attempts, fearing more storms. With no way to reach CROATOAN and no supplies to remain, White was forced to abandon the search. It was a haunting moment he carried for the rest of his life. For decades, English explorers searched for signs of the lost colony. Some indigenous groups spoke of European-looking tribespeople living among them. These accounts described individuals with light eyes or unfamiliar clothing styles. Others claimed the colonists had been killed in conflicts between tribes. With each new rumor, the mystery deepened, and the truth became harder to untangle. Archaeologists in later centuries uncovered artifacts that appeared English yet were found far from Roanoke. Tools, ceramics, and personal items hinted at small groups of colonists assimilating into indigenous communities. These objects suggested cooperation rather than violence. Still, none definitively linked to the original settlers, leaving researchers torn between hope and uncertainty. One theory suggests the colonists divided to improve survival chances. Some may have sailed southward, hoping to reach safer harbors along the coast. Small boats were present at the colony and found missing when White returned. If they tried such a journey, storms or starvation could easily have overwhelmed them before reaching another settlement. Another idea points to internal conflict. The colony faced food shortages and doubts about leadership from the start. Hunger can drive desperate decisions. Some historians propose that factions formed, forcing a split or causing violence among the settlers. Without bodies or clear evidence, the idea remains speculative, but it sheds light on the pressures the colonists endured. Cultural assimilation remains one of the most compelling explanations. Several tribes in the region had a history of adopting outsiders. If the colonists were welcomed, they might have blended in over time. Marriages, shared farming, and mutual protection could have provided the safety they lacked on their own. Oral histories from some tribes support this possibility. Theories involving hostile attacks persist as well. Some historians believe the colonists may have been killed by a rival tribe seeking control of the area. Conflicts between indigenous nations were complex and long-standing. A vulnerable group like the Roanoke settlers could have easily become entangled in such struggles. But again, the absence of wreckage or remains leaves this uncertain. One more dramatic theory suggests Spanish forces may have destroyed the colony. At the time, Spain viewed English settlements as threats. Spanish patrols operated along the coastline, searching for such outposts. If they found Roanoke, they might have eradicated it quietly. But no Spanish reports mention such an attack, making this idea largely speculative. Modern science has offered new hope for answers. DNA testing has been proposed to identify descendants of colonists who may have joined indigenous groups. While results are inconclusive, some families in the region claim ancestry linked to early English settlers. These stories add human depth to the mystery, blending genetics with cultural memory. Additionally, satellite imagery and advanced ground scanning tech have revealed structures and artifacts buried deep beneath soil near Roanoke. Some appear to match 16th-century English styles. These findings suggest the settlers may have moved inland, building temporary shelters before integrating with local tribes. Still, more digging is needed to confirm any connection. A site known as Site X, located miles from Roanoke, produced English pottery fragments dating to the correct era. Archaeologists believe this area could have sheltered a faction of the colonists. While the evidence isn't conclusive, it supports the idea of relocation rather than extinction. Each small discovery keeps the mystery alive. The disappearance of the colony remains compelling because it blends fact with speculation. Few mysteries involve so many possible outcomes that all seem equally plausible. The settlers could have survived peacefully, faced violent ends, or scattered into multiple groups. Without concrete records, researchers must rely on fragments that may never form a complete picture. John White's final years mirrored the nation's confusion. He returned to England haunted by regret, convinced he had failed his family. He left behind letters describing the colony's last traces. These writings remain some of the most important first-hand accounts. They express hope that the colonists were still alive, living somewhere beyond his reach. Generations of historians returned to Roanoke to retrace White's steps. The site itself changed as forests reclaimed the land. Excavations revealed how quickly nature erases human presence. With every dig, researchers hoped for a breakthrough, a carving, a tool, a bone, but found only fragments hinting at larger stories that remained hidden. Over time, Roanoke transformed into a symbol of lost beginnings. The mystery encourages questions about survival, cultural exchange, and the fragile nature of early colonization. It reminds us that history is not always written but often guessed. What the colonists felt, feared, or decided remains locked within the island's quiet landscape. The legend also reveals how much stories evolve. Writers added myths, including tales of ghostly settlers and cursed lands. These dramatizations blur reality, but they also show how deeply the mystery resonates. Even without supernatural elements, the unexplained disappearance feels haunting enough to inspire endless interpretations. Teachers, filmmakers, and researchers continue to explore the lost colony. Each new generation brings fresh questions. Why was CROATOAN carved with no distress symbol? Why dismantle homes rather than abandon them? Why leave no writing, no markers, no clear trail? It's these unanswered details that sustain the mystery. Despite centuries of searching, the Roanoke story remains unresolved. Some scholars believe the answer lies in unexcavated land. Others argue that assimilation is the most logical end. Either way, the colonists' fate likely involved human resilience, people adapting, negotiating, and surviving in unfamiliar territory. Roanoke also represents a turning point in American history. Lessons from the colony informed later settlements like Jamestown, which adopted stronger planning and supply systems. Though lost, the Roanoke colonists shaped the foundation of future English expansion. Their disappearance changed how exploration and colonization unfolded. Today, visitors to Roanoke Island walk through reconstructed settlements and quiet woods. The air feels heavy with the past. Guides share stories, artifacts, and theories, inviting guests to imagine the colonists' final days. Standing there, it's easy to picture families debating impossible choices as danger and uncertainty closed in. Ultimately, the lost colony endures because it taps into our deepest curiosity. Without definitive answers, we project fears and hopes onto the vanished settlers. Did they find safety? Did they perish? Or did they begin anew in a hidden community? Until more evidence emerges, Roanoke will remain a haunting question echoing across American history.